Okay, so welcome everybody to the first in-person meeting of the Local Pension Fund Board since most of you joined. We have most officers and members attending in person, but I would like to welcome both Val Lim and our officers who are attending virtually. I would also like to welcome those members of the public and press who are watching via the live stream on the council's website. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the council website. The council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and tweet during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place? There's no fire alarm scheduled today, so if the alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting, or the chair will adjourn the meeting, and we'll make our way downstairs via the nearest available fire exit, which is through the middle doors on the left. The master point is in the car park to the rear of the building. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the board attending virtually to keep their video camera switched on for the entirety of the meeting and keep their microphone muted except when invited to speak. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right of their screen or by indicating to the chair if you're meeting in person. However, if you are online and we're closing an item and you believe your raised hand has not been seen, please unmute yourself at an appropriate point and address the chair. And if there are technical problems, there will be an adjournment declared while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. That being said, let's move to the first item, which is the election of the chair. This is the first meeting with the appropriate attendance since the annual general meeting of full council this year, and therefore it's necessary to elect the chair and vice chair of the board for the coming year. Could I please have any nominations for the chair?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Dennis Payne, please, the chair.
And I'd like to second Councillor Dennis Payne.
There seems to be a general consensus in support of the nomination. And if anyone disagrees, raise their hand, but otherwise I will take that recommendation as carried. So welcome to our returning chair.
I'd like to thank the board for its vote of confidence in my chairmanship. So let us now move to the second item on the agenda, which is the appointment of the vice chair of the board. I am proposing to nominate The second item on the agenda is the appointment of the vice chair of the board. I'm proposing to nominate Barry O'Sullivan as vice chair. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second Barry as vice chair.
Thank you, Val. Are there any other nominations? There is a general consensus in support of the nomination. If anyone disagrees, please raise their hand now. I see no hands, so we will take that nomination as carried. Thank you very much and welcome to your role as Vice Chair.
Don't think it's a minute of silence, so I think you can be.
I apologize if you heard somebody starting the playing of the last post outside. We've now closed the doors and we'll continue with the meeting as intended. Rhiannon, do we have any apologies for absence?
We've received apologies from Councillor Simon King. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Thank you, Val, for shaking your head. I'll get used to working with you at a distance. So moving on, we are being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on 1st of July as a correct record. Obviously, if there are items about confidential portion of the minutes, we will need to take that separately. Do members have any questions on those minutes?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you, Val. On that basis, the recommendation to approve the minutes is carried. With the minutes is an updated action log and that is included in the papers. Do members have any questions on the action log? Excellent.
No
Sorry.
questions, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll take the action log as noted. And item 3 is the internal audit report. I believe, Mark, you're presenting this item?
It's going to be Scott, who's on the screen.
Hi, Chair. Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, so to just give you a little bit of context first around the internal audit service, because things have changed since last year. So we were under a shared service arrangement from during the last financial year. That was a shared service arrangement which was headed by Milton Keynes. And it was almost like a continuation of what was the LGSS audit service. During the course of the last financial year, there was a decision by Section 151 officers of the client authorities under that shared service to split up and have arrange an in-house service. So we have been doing that from the 1st of April. We have an in-house service now set up for the West Northants, which as part of the pension service being part of that authority, managed within that authority, we provide the internal auditing of the Northamptonshire Pension Fund and also the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund. We're a team of myself, and I have a team of 7 underneath me, and one of those auditors, Anand Prasad, who undertook this audit is also online. We have a new head of internal audit or head of audit and risk management who joined the authority from the beginning of August. So this report is in her name. That's Jen Morris. So that's some context over the in-house service now that's being delivered from the 1st of April. Our commitment continues to providing assurance to on the pension fund arrangements and presenting those to the relevant pension committees and boards. As part of the scoping of the 21-22 audit, we took on board comments raised by members of the what I believe was the Cambridgeshire Pension Committee in terms of the scoping of that audit, and we've introduced a couple of areas within there, and one that we've introduced ourselves. And those 3 areas within the scope of the current audit was the reporting of KPIs, the identification and reporting of breaches, and also the monitoring and reporting of risk. The results of the audit are a positive one. It continues on from the assurance that's been provided year on year to yourselves. We've given a substantial assurance around the system design and a satisfactory one around the compliance areas. And with that, we've raised 7 recommendations. 2 of those recommendations were dealt with during the course of finalising the report. And the further 5 recommendations, 2 were around checks in the checking process. 1 was around KPIs, and 2 were in respect of breaches, which I believe were, one of them certainly was addressed at the last pension committee. This report has been presented to the Cambridgeshire Pension Committee, and they are satisfied with the assurance that it's provided. We've also picked up the 2021 actions that were outstanding, and they've been addressed as part of our review. And with that, rather than me going through in terms of the level of detail, there's been positive response from management to implementing those recommendations. 2 or 3 have been implemented in the course of the last few weeks. And I'm open to questions from members of this committee or the board.
Mark, do you want to add anything?
No, I'm happy to,
Okay.
if there's any specific questions, any of those management actions, happy to respond.
Okay. Val, I understand you have a number of questions.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. Would you like me to go through them?
I understand you have, in fact, a significant number of questions. I'm just wondering if they come into any pattern or anything else, whether actually going through each one at this point rather than perhaps separately might be the best way. But if you'd like to give us some indication of what your questions are about, I would appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I do have a number of, well, actually have numerous queries, probably about 20.
Oh,
right. And I probably agree with Dennis that maybe the Chair, maybe that we do need to have a separate meeting really to go through them. But if I could just ask probably 1 or 2 at this point in time, 1 or 2 that I'm really concerned about. And there's been an added one actually. First of all, Scott, you mentioned that Jen is basically the owner of the report, and it's in her name. On the report, it's not in her name.
yeah, I can answer that for you if you would like at this point.
Please.
Yeah. So the report during the course of the first 6 months of us going from being in-house, we had a period where we had 1 or 2 interim managers caretakering within that role. We had, or the authority had appointed originally to a head of audit and risk management, and that person decided not to take up post, which created further problems for us in terms of the management of the whole service. At the point the report was finalised, Audra Statham was the interim head of audit in a caretaker role at that point in time when it was finalised. Jen Morris came in as the chief audit executive, as it were, from a statutory perspective from the 1st of August. So the committee report is within her name, but the appendix, the final report as an appendix, is obviously had been finalised in the name of the chief audit executive at that point in time.
Okay, for clarity, if someone looks at this code going forward, they will obviously see Audra's name on it. Is it not better to actually put Jen's name on it for clarity purposes?
I think for the purposes of this audit that's already been finalised, if we were to go back and reopen final reports to amend them accordingly, we would end up continually doing that on an ongoing basis. So in my mind, it's all about who was in post as that statutory post at a point in time. So from my perspective, it can stay as it is at that point in time, dated as a final report.
Okay, that's your wish. I don't know what the rest of the board think to that idea. They probably agree with you. Okay, right, Scott. I have got on your maps, pages 11 to 18, I noticed that there are a lot of dates that are actually have the due date has passed, well and truly passed. What evidence do you actually have that they have actually been delivered by these dates?
Yeah, one thing we do as part of the finalisation of any report, and obviously there's been some delay between the finalisation of this report and it being presented to the relevant pension committees and boards. That's obviously the case when you see the dates. We do have a process of obtaining management comments on progress of the achievement of these recommendations on an ongoing basis. And as part of that, we would it would be for us to monitor that situation and report back most likely within the next annual report on that, unless you as members determined that you wanted pension management to provide you with periodical updates on its implementation during the course of the cycle of meetings that you have. So from the perspective of the report that you see here, there are certainly from my perspective, when I can see the responses here that have been received, you know, there are already 2 or 3 of those recommendations that have been implemented where the due date has been passed. And in respect of the recommendation, the first one, which was a date of the 31st of August, Mark Whitby may be able to sort of provide you with the reasons as to why that due date has moved to the end of December, and he has specific reasons around that. But in terms of responses, if you I'm quite happy to go through, or certainly Mark provide you with his management feedback to those on the delivery of them.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Scott. Mark, probably you could come in. I've got no idea that the first one had moved to the 31st of December, because the information I have is the 31st of August.
Obviously, this would be the opportunity for us to discuss whether there's been any change in these management actions. The committee is already aware. Sorry, Scottish, I think it's the end of November is what I've informed the committee. So basically, we've there's probably 2 areas in the whole service delivery that I think we've under-delivered, and this is one of them. The other is the unprocessed leavers. But this has been I think, number one, if I could describe it, it's where we think there are issues with employer data. We go back to the employer, usually in a timely manner, but we don't follow through every single case to conclusion and either accept the data as being correct, or actually continue to chase through until we get it. So that's what number one is about. It's not about the actual anything we've done to the data. It's the fact that we've identified there may be issues. There's no doubt there's been under delivery in terms of this particular aspect of work, and what has happened is we actually lost the systems and projects manager shortly after this report was finished, and it took a month or two for me to get a replacement in. And so just like Joe Kent, should I say, has taken over. She's moved from the governance lead role into the systems and projects manager role. She is my most experienced manager. It is an incredibly important area of work, both from the systems perspective, but also project work coming. And so what I did is I said, we can't deliver this by 31st of August. Therefore, we'll extend it to the end of November with a clear plan, and we're on track for that. So that's where we are with that particular activity.
Mark, can I just ask a question? The due date was 31st of August. Who actually came up with that date? Because surely you must have known that that date was not achievable actually when the audit was discussed.
Not at all. That was the date I agreed with the individual who was responsible at the time, and I had no reason to not believe it could be. I do see this as a particularly straightforward area to sort out. So whilst unprocessed levers, which I mentioned, is incredibly complex in terms of its interaction with processes, the employers again, but whether we can do bulk calculations, etc. This to me should be fairly straightforward for us to resolve with the right management in place, because what we are talking about is effectively categorizing queries as to whether they are we definitely need a response, or versus ones where we do definitely, so once we're prepared to accept the data, sorry, should I say, if we don't get a response, versus ones where we actually do need a response because we know it's wrong. So if you categorize them correctly and then give very clear deadlines and follow through, it should be a straightforward process to manage. So that's why I certainly don't want to see this on next year's audit. But we did need an extra bit of time to get that in place this year.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. Can we just now, this is really a question for Scott. Item 2 is great that it's complete, but I understand, from management's comments that there was some information that was supplied that actually wasn't correct. I suppose my question really is, in the numerous audits I've done, where something like this is almost like a non-event, would it not be included as part of like the clearance of the audit, rather than actually coming through to actually the audit report?
Yeah, I think in this instance there are occasions whereby we would certainly through an exit meeting address issues and then not raise them in the report. We'd already got to that point of having this issue particularly raised within the draft report. And from my perspective, there are occasions where it's useful just to get that message across about a certain finding that we've raised. And whilst it has been addressed, it's just useful, I think, for observers and other members to understand how what we had raised at that point was an issue of importance, and that how management had addressed it, rather than actually maybe not necessarily covering it, but it not being within the report. So there are occasions where we will do that, certainly whereby this was still an issue at the point of the draft report when we were having those discussions. So there are instances where I think to give you more information is sometimes better than to probably sweep it under the carpet, if that makes sense.
I wasn't suggesting you swept it under the carpet.
No, you know what, yeah, but
it would be in your audit file.
To be, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you for explaining that one. And number 3, September the 30th. new dependents checking, new pensioners authorisation, etc. This is obviously an essential item. Has this one been completed, please?
Again, probably another one for Mark to address, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, yes, it has. I mean, there was the absence of a limit for this particular category of work. Just to explain, we had a check-in limit for pensioners, which was based on the value of the pension, and then obviously from that value of pension, a certain level of lump sum can flow from it. However, for dependents, for the sort of like death grants, there isn't always a pension linked to it. And so therefore there effectively wasn't a check and limit in place. So that's been the appropriate level of check has been discussed with the internal audit team, and we are using that. So effectively we're mirroring the same degree of level of check as we are for the pensions. We've got that now down now, yes.
Okay, brilliant. I'm really pleased that's done.
Well, can I just ask you to pause a moment? I'd like to see if there are any questions from the other board members on this item.
Sorry, Chair, I was going to raise a question, but I don't think I do. I think Val's points are very valid, and the audit is key. Personally, I do note an improvement on the last one that we saw, particularly in terms of the scope. So I think in terms of the detailed points that Val's making, I'm very interested to see what those are in due course. But overall, my only real comment, I have no questions, my own real comment is that I think it's an improvement.
Thank you.
I'm also interested to hear Val's comments and questions and the answers to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Val, Scott, and possibly even Mark, I'm conscious that you have a lot more questions, Val, but I just wonder whether, particularly given that we have been suggested we should try to keep to time this morning, whether there's a more effective way of making progress on that. I'd welcome views from Mark and Scott and yourself, Val.
Obviously, I'm happy to convene a meeting with whoever is interested in attending, not just if it's just Val, but and to go through any aspect of it. Obviously, we are, occasionally the dates will slip on one or two of these, but when we put them in place, we believe we're going to meet them. Otherwise, we wouldn't obviously commit to them because all the audit team are, they're completely understanding of if it's a very involved piece of work, then they're prepared for a longer date, indeed to the end of the financial year. So we did feel they were the appropriate dates, but happy to discuss any, offline, any questions you have. I'm sure Scott would be a willing participant in that process as well.
Yes, Chair, I would be, and maybe it would be an opportunity for Jem Morris as well to be part of that conversation, and maybe we could also then use that as a catalyst for determining maybe having some discussion over the scope for next year's audit also.
Val, what's your view?
My view is, I'll put this into perspective. That's only one of my 20 issues, which was all about the due dates. So I totally agree with us having a meeting, because I appreciate it is taking up a lot of the time and we need to be finished by 12 o'clock. So I very much welcome a separate meeting with whoever wants to attend, but obviously we need the people that, like Mark and Scott, and possibly Jen there on, at the meeting as well.
Thank you. What I'd like to propose then is that we organise a separate meeting, a separate virtual meeting for all those who want to go through your, listen to your questions, and hopefully those who will be able to answer your questions. And we'll take that offline if that's okay with everybody.
It's good with me.
Can we make it clear that when you say offline, it could be a meeting that other members of the board are aware of and can join if they wish online? Just so that if this is a continuation of this meeting, we want to be seen to be as transparent as possible. I agree with you that probably it's better to pursue these detailed questions in detail. I would, if I knew there was a meeting going on, I would try and join it to try and understand the questions for a start. But I was also keen for the reputation of this board that it is not seen to be stopping there and censoring anything or anything that anybody might misinterpret, which I'm sure you were not doing.
Can I add on something? If I wrote some of these up and put them in an email to everybody, at least then there'll be time for you to read, digest, and actually for Scott and the audit team to actually probably search out some of the details.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Yeah, that'd be good.
Thank you, Val, and my apologies for an inappropriate word there. I did not mean that we should be excluding anybody. I was expecting that meeting to be open to the whole board. But rather than continue with this, which, knowing that the depth of Val's understanding and knowledge in this area could get into some detail which some of the rest of us might struggle with at first call, I was suggesting that separate meeting. So if that's okay with everybody, then we'll proceed on that basis.
Okay with me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Val, and I look forward to getting your questions, and I look forward to also having a chance to understand them.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate, yeah, I'm happy with that, but yeah, I would like the opportunity to attend, but if I can't attend, then that's also should be okay.
Thank you, Barry. So I would go with Martin's response that this report is shows progress from last year, and that is excellent, but that we have more questions to discuss, and we will do that at a future meeting. So thank you for that. Thank you, Scott. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. And I'd like to move on now to the administration report, and I believe you're dealing with that, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. So for this administration report, I'll just pick out some of the key details in order as we go through. So obviously under section 3, we've got the administration performance that we've started bringing to you, which just details there that there were 2 informal complaints managed in the period, and the context of that was 7,943 calculations over that corresponding period. With the key performance indicators, as you'll see, all of the targets were met with the exception of 5. And under section 4, the detail behind that was mainly down to performance issues and some additional resourcing issues in those particular teams, which has now been resolved. The contributions have been quite consistent within the 99% for the period in question. So good targets in terms of contributions from our employers, but obviously just a little bit more work to do there in terms of getting that up to the 100%. Under section 6, there is one breach of the law there, just to bring your attention to, in addition to the usual contribution payment, one outside of the 5-year period. So every year we have to calculate annual allowance for anybody that is likely to exceed for that particular year. We also have to look at the 3 years prior, and we have a statutory deadline of the 6th of October to make sure that the members have received their statements. And as you'll see there, 11 of those statements this particular year were not sent on time. However, they were sent by the 25th of October, so that has now been resolved. In line with our processes, these have been recorded on our internal breaches log, so we do have a record of those. Under the IDRP sections, we've got one each on each of those, one administering authority and one employer dispute. Obviously, the admin authority one is still going through the process, and the employer dispute is fully concluded there. That's all I wanted to say on the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions?
It's not really a question, but section 8, just wanted noted to say well done. That there's no breaches there.
Thank you.
No, thank you. 6.2, just a layman's question, really. When refunds are not paid outside the, haven't been paid, when it says outside the statutory, does that mean it was done inside the statutory? So yes, sorry, we were paid outside of it. Have they been paid? Because the removal of that requirement doesn't seem to a layperson really fair, if that means they don't have to be paid ever. And I'm sure that's not what you mean. Could you explain what actually is happening to those payments if they were delayed, but hopefully not indefinitely?
Yeah, so what will happen there is there'll be a bit of a mixture. So the ones that haven't been paid in the statutory period of the 5 years, it doesn't mean that they'll never get paid. It just means that we haven't been able to pay in the prescribed timescale. This quite often is because we've lost contact with the member and we've been unable to pay. So unfortunately, it leaves us in a situation where we sometimes just cannot get hold of the members to pay. So it's definitely not a case of we never will do. It's just a case of we will pay when we can. But unfortunately for these particular ones, we haven't been able to either make contact at all, or we haven't had a response from communications that we've sent. In the future, this particular legislation is supposed to be removed, but it hasn't been at the moment because I think it is recognised that it is an issue for the LGPS where we are unable to physically pay these.
Yes, so just in normal fairness then, given that there are probably better ways of chasing people now and people leave traces in ways that we might not. On the other hand, we obviously cannot have endless time and effort invested in such a thing. Presumably we have a checklist of the things you have done that is recognised within the industry, and hopefully we're compliant with that good practice if not a breach of the law is in doubt.
Yeah, I mean, we did if you like, a whole fund search for people with missing addresses, not that relatively in recent times, actually. I should say this is the way around the regulation would be to move these funds into a non-interest bearing account, which is not the pension fund itself, and then pay from there. But nationally, that's a step that hasn't really been taken by funds because of this. So everyone's doing effectively the same thing, which is continuing to pay these and report them as immaterial breaches. So it'd never be the case that the individual wouldn't get the money if they came and asked for it. It's just a case of whether it came directly from the fund or whether we got around the problem of the legislation by moving it into a separate account in the first place. So we're consistent with other funds in this area at the moment.
Well, you have a question, I believe.
Yeah, just one from me. It's actually on Appendix 3, which is the exempt one. I won't mention any names or anything, just the bottom row of the table. The item remains unpaid. Can you, Michelle, maybe you can just enlighten us a little bit whether this situation has now changed?
Apologies, yes, I can. I can confirm that that employer has now paid their contributions, so it's now turned to a late payment rather than a unpaid.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Michelle.
If there are no others, I see no other questions. So I will take it that we are happy to note that report. Thank you very much. We then move on to the governance and compliance report. And I believe this is another one with you, Michelle. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So again, I'll just pull out some of the highlights of the report and some of the developments since the last meeting. So on the pension dashboards, obviously we've spoken about these before and on the continual journey to meet the requirements when they come into force. In addition to the report, I can now confirm that the regulations have been laid before Parliament. From what we understand, they're due to be discussed at the House of Lords on the 15th of November, and then the House of Commons will be a specified date after that point. So in terms of the legislation side of things have started to move there. It has kept the date of the 30th of September 2024 for a staging date for the LGPS, and this was identified earlier in the year due to the complexities within the LGPS, so that's looking to stay the same. In terms of internal actions, so we have now got the draft project plan in place, so that's just going around for some final review. But effectively the plan is looking at all areas of obviously getting the dashboards implemented by the staging date. The actions on there are looking obviously around some of the technical builds, the interactions between data, and obviously underlying all of that, the data quality that sits behind that to make sure that we're on track for our own data quality purposes. The second item, just a quick note on the Scheme Advisory Board annual report. So as you'll see there, every year the Scheme Advisory Board publish their annual report as a bit of a snapshot for the LGPS universe. And under section 2.2.2 there, it just pulls out some of those highlights from the report. If anybody is interested in the full report, the link is under section 2.2.3 there. Under section 2.4, just really to add to the report that the consultation has obviously now gone live on the 1st of September, and the closing date for that is the 24th. Really just to add that the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund will be putting in a response to that consultation. The only other things to pull out of the report is on Appendix 1. So this is the new training plan for the year, which consists of everything we've done up to date and what we're intending to do. So the first comment I would make is under November, the Pension Regulator Code of Practice training. We're going to need to delay this because we're obviously still waiting on national guidance in terms of the new Code of Practice. So this will be delayed to an appropriate time when we've got some further clarification on that. The second training scheduled for November is the conflicts of interest training. Hopefully everybody has received an appointment from Aon for that training, but obviously if not, please let me know. It's a really important training session, this one, because we effectively, as part of the good governance review, need to make sure that we have a conflicts register at a fund level rather than just relying on the administering authority declaration. So there'll be a bit of a change in culture from the way that we're currently operating. So it'd be really beneficial for us to all understand how that works. Following from that training, the intention is then that the policy itself, the revised policy, will go to pension committee in December. And then because of the timings, it will then come to the board in January for post scrutiny. The only other thing to mention about training is that you'll probably remember last year we had the Aon summer suite of the core training for board and committee members. We're actually looking now at solutions going forward in terms of member training. And what we're hoping to do is go down the route of an online tool this time. So what that should allow us to do is have access to core modules at times that are convenient to all members. So it's more flexible. The modules will be kept fully up to date and members will be alerted as things in the LGPS landscape change. And it's also going to be a really good way of recording all that training and having records as a board as well. But that's the update for that particular report. But I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Yes, on my training, I think this continues a correspondence I think I had with you, Michelle, actually, about being able to look at the modules that I was looking at last year, and they were new to me then and are still very unfamiliar, and my ability to draw on that understanding is limited and I need revision. Now, the response from Aon, I think, was, well, it goes out of date, and they quite rightly don't want things to go out in their name that are out of date or be hung on to by people like me who may be looking at them again. Obviously, the core stuff, the general thing that you just assume everybody knows, but is something that does need repeating. If we have got that core stuff that doesn't go out of date much, that would be very useful, and if it can be on the county council area where we can access it, that would be very welcome as well. I'm quite happy to advise you on the needs of the inadequate, because I represent them on this board, I think, as well as I can. Keen to learn, but knowing it, they need to revise. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So this online tool effectively will have a dual aspect. It will have all the core mandatory training on there as standard, and that means you can go back to it as many times as you like, whether it's been refreshed or not. You may personally want to, and it'll also put on additional key items. But in addition to that, we will obviously still run our other training as well. So if there's any bespoke training we need on a particular topic, say such as the valuation, those will still continue in a different format. And obviously there's all the external conferences and those kind of training sessions. So between those kind of different approaches, hopefully it'll be a wider scope for members to be able to participate in.
Michelle, I'm not sure that I've had an invite to the 25th from Aon. Can you ask them to resend it? I may be able to get there, I may not, but unless I know the time, I don't know.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sure it's 10 a.m, but I'll get them to resend it to you.
Yeah, if you could, please, yes. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of points, Chair. So I had to rely on the electronic version of the papers because I didn't get my physical papers until yesterday. But 2.1.5, I didn't actually have a link to the LGPC response on my electronic version. I did note it.
Oh, okay, as in the link wasn't working.
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah.
thing. Yeah, no problem. I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, and the other thing, sort of just really my points for clarification purposes, but the TCFD proposals under the scenario analysis, that sounds like that would be something the actuary would be doing. Would that be, am I correct in thinking that?
So we've already done scenario analysis to inform the climate action plan that was undertaken on our behalf by Mercer. So generally it would be an investment consultant or a specialist in that area. It wouldn't usually be the actuary, although they will do work in connection with evaluation. Really detailed stuff at a fund level is done by investment consultant or a specialist in that kind of climate science.
And yeah, sorry, I've got another point as well. So I did also note that the under the targets, effectively you get to choose your own target. It just seems a bit, naturally you would choose the target that you'd more easily meet rather than it not being a stretching kind of challenge.
Yeah, I mean, generally pension funds at the moment, in terms of, you're talking about the sort of, if you like, the target as to when you're going to hit net zero, most pension funds are going for 2050, 2045. They're not kind of mirroring what individual authorities are doing, because a council is not a global investor and doesn't have a huge portfolio. So I think as time goes on, people will narrow down what their target actually is. But ultimately, you can only do what you believe you can do without, what's retaining the diversification of the fund, etc. But if you're talking about other more specific metrics, which also are obviously you can set again, there is some flexibility around that, although there are clear recommendations. It may be worth also looking at the LGA response to the consultation which came out this week, because they have gone into some detail about what whether there should be even more flexibility than's been suggested for a period of time, and then narrow it down later down the line when methodologies are more consistent, etc.
I see no other hands indicating questions. So on that basis, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. And we've been asked to note that report, and I believe we have done. The next item is the business plan update. Can I ask you, Mark, to present this?
Thank you, Chair. We have new if you like, this year. I put in the executive summary or notes as sort of a RAG status for each of the business plan activities, which enable us to hone in on the ones which aren't going to plan. So I'll talk through that and then just say a few words about the finances, and I'll invite obviously any questions on any aspect after that. So just in terms of the ambers, the first two ambers are actually where we are tracking the regulator's new code of practice introduction and the scheme advisory board's good governance recommendations. They are much delayed, therefore we obviously aren't undertaking much activity in those areas. So that's the reason why those are amber. It's just tracking the external environment. The other one, which is similar in a sense, is the website and digital communications review. We are completely refreshing both the member and the employer website. The project kicked off slightly later than we thought, because we were waiting for the digital comms team to be freed up to undertake the work, but now it's completely back on track. So I believe that will be tracking as green next time. I'm sure if you have any questions around that, Corey will be able to answer those in a moment. Which leaves us with the one other amber, which is the unprocessed levers, which I mentioned earlier. We have been progressing them within the projects team, but the issue has been more have been building up due to delays in being able to process cases within the business as usual team. And so for that reason, I've agreed some additional resources with the respective Section 151 officers of both funds and the two pension committees. So I think about 3 extra staff across the two funds are going in to business as usual to help keep on top of it there. It's not just about extra bodies, it's also about being more clever with the way we deal with poor employer data and validations. And we've just rolled out some bulk processing capability within business as usual as well. So that was being trialed in projects, it worked there. We've rolled it out into the business as usual team. And they, for example, ran a couple 100 cases through with a 80% success rate. So vastly improved processing time by doing it by that approach. I would add, we need to tie that in with the internal audit review next year to make sure that they do audit that new approach to dealing with those cases. Beyond that, on the finances, you'll see where we're clearly on the fund account, we're not getting the investment returns we expected, so therefore that's the biggest variance there. The other variance is on the management expenses side. There's obviously a staffing cost increase there. A lot of that is actually coming through from, we have to set our budget prior to knowing necessarily what pay awards will be. So it's actually relating to pay awards this financial year compared to what we expected. I think the only other thing I will say is that I believe there will be some centralized costs coming through which aren't quite reflected in there yet. These are not in any way material to the fund, but we have been purchasing, obviously, for hybrid work and some extra IT equipment. And I noticed the other day as we were preparing this that actually I couldn't see that in our accounting. So we've been chasing that through. So there could be a small pressure there as well. Apart from that, I'll throw it open to any questions.
Any questions from anyone?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, so you've got a new activity, private equity review. Why in particular this asset class?
Sorry, I did mean to flag the 2 extra activities. Private equity, it's because we were undertaking a bit of a bigger review than we expected. So rather than following on with the implementation plan of putting X 100 million possibly in a given year into private equity, we're actually having to look at what we need again and kind of sync it with the pooled program. And so where the extra complexity is coming through is because the asset pool has not made private equity available as of yet, and the project plan for that is a year or 2 out. So we're having to do local things and then sync it into the pooled program when it becomes available. So it's almost back to the drawing board to see what are the best options for the fund in light of those delays. Hence why we've pulled it out as a specific activity. You'll see also there's another activity which is the looking at the strategic asset allocation post valuation, i.e. how much we have in each asset class, because obviously the funding position of the fund is very different now than what it was. So therefore you may need to look at tweaking the asset allocation as part of the valuation process.
Mark, I'm pleased to see that you're getting the website work back on track. Do we have any metrics or information about how well or not it is meeting the needs of employers and employees?
I'll hand over to Corey because they did actually do some research with different categories of stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't have the metrics to hand, unfortunately, but the team rightly did do quite extensive interviews with a selection of employer and member users of the website, as well as officers as well internally, to the point that on the back of those interviews, they've actually developed 5 AI-generated personalities of the different users that might use the website and categorize what their biggest concerns are, what the first things they're looking for on the website are, what their priorities are from getting from the website. The way they developed that was by getting people to carry out a task. They didn't even start them on the website. They simply watched them on the computer, followed what they were doing and said, right, we want you to navigate to the pension website and find how you do these things. So they've done very, very extensive work to get a picture of how people want to be using the website, what they expect from it. And we're going to build the new website on the back of those findings.
That sounds excellent. What's going to be, presumably at this moment, you're building a website that will meet demands that are currently unmet. So what you're presumably hoping is that more people will come to visit the website. What are you doing to try to persuade more people to visit the website?
We haven't got that far along in the project at the moment. At the moment, we are building, or the team that's doing it for us, the digital team, are building prototypes of the new website based on that feedback, which are then going to run past users again to see what they think of the new process. Once we get an idea of what we're going to change on the website and how we're actually going to host that, because we haven't even got a decision on the way we want to host the website yet, because it will depend on the requirements of building on the best hosting platform, we'll then move forward to implementation over the next year from April onwards. And we'll have a plan at that point in terms of how we're going to encourage use of the website. But in terms of general engagement for members, some of the things that we have been doing is increasing the presentations that we do for members through their employers. So we gave a member presentation in Cambridgeshire recently for Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council, and 400 people attended that session, and it went down very well. And just yesterday, as part of Pension Attention Week, it's a pension awareness raising week this week, we produced a series of videos for members as well that takes them through their pension journey through their career, starting with what you need to know and what you need to do as a brand new member, the things that you might consider partway through your career, but linking that to things that are happening in their lifestyle. So for example, if you get married or you move house, or you might be finding that things are tight at the moment, these are things that you can do and consider to do with your pension. And that goes all the way up to retirement planning, and including a video showing you how to use the website as well. So we are really trying to get lots more material out there about not just the pension fund, but using the website to help facilitate managing your pension.
That sounds excellent. Are any of those available for the board to have a look at if they want to?
They are. Funny enough, at the end of the meeting in any other business, I was going to mention the videos and then offer to send them round as well. So I can certainly do that.
Sorry to have stolen your thunder there. Thank you. Val, my apologies.
It's all right, Chair. First thing, I just wanted to add on from what Corey was saying. I actually took part in the survey, and I really found it very thorough. And yeah, I enjoyed my session. And yes, I did have to find some certain parts of the website, and I've forgotten what my password was. But anyway, I did find it eventually. So thank you for including me in that. Back on to the business plan update. This is just sort of a general question, probably for Mark. You're doing some procurement, quite a bit of procurement work with the procurement team. I noticed that you're going to be using the national LGPS frameworks. I just wondered, does this framework actually specify how many suppliers you need to go out to who are already on that framework for your tendering process?
You go basically there are varying number of employers on the different ways. It might be ranged from, for example, 4 for some of the consultancy advice to many more for some of the ad hoc work. You go out to all of those suppliers who have effectively showed they have the capability to perform the services for a particular framework, and hope you get all of those, to be quite frank, all of those on that framework apply. I would say increasingly for some of the really large areas where perhaps is quite intensive work to submit a tender application like actuarial, typically funds are getting only a couple of responses from, let's say, the 4 main suppliers these days. So that has been noticed within the industry. But yeah, I would hope to have competition in each of those procurements, but we will be open to anyone who's on the particular framework.
Of course, yes. Okay, yeah, I understand the concept of framework and getting, so if you go to those suppliers, when you come to re-tender. Page 65, there was something to do with, I forget where to, it talked about, I just wondered, why is Hampshire County Council the lead procurement? And I can't remember whereabouts. It was on the access asset pool. Just for information, really.
Because they've kindly put their hand up. There's lots of procurements going on at the pool level at the moment. So the host authority for the pool is Essex County Council. So that's where the access support unit sits. They tend to, when we're doing a framework procurement, their team tends to lead on that. But when it's a full OJU procurement, like some of these activities are, then we ask for volunteers within the pool, and Hampshire have put their hands up for some of those procurements because at the moment they have the capacity and the capability to do so. Just to clarify why Cambridgeshire hasn't, is because with LGSS disaggregating, there are effectively fairly new procurement teams being created within Northamptonshire and Cambridgeshire. And so obviously we've had discussions. I've had discussions with the Section 151 officer, and it's just not the right time for us to put our hands up at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for explaining that. That's really helpful.
Yes, this is a combination perhaps of what you were just saying about the website and videos and the cyber strategy in terms of fraud. I'm thinking of older pensioners, perhaps widows, who inherit and largely misunderstand, a scheme of which they may not be practically on top of it. And I think of myself getting older on this one. And they are obviously vulnerable, and we would be concerned for them. This is not the sort of fraud that is generally talked about, which is making sure you don't act fraudulently, I'm sure, or I don't. But if we are hopefully aware of the scams that can fly about, and I know the County Council's got officers with that focus, sadly. Are there ways in which the website can lead people to that, or even better still, there are even sort of just links to YouTubes you can put on your phone with a QR code if you're not good at finding a way around a website? Those sort of things where people are not patronized, but helped, to recognize the baddies.
No, that is something that in our communications we are very conscious of, and we do include anti-fraud messaging where appropriate. So particularly in the pensioner newsletter, we have anti-fraud information on there, and there is anti-fraud information on the website at the moment, which will ensure in the new website continues to be a presence. So retired members were one of the groups of members that we also talked to and have developed a profile about. So we certainly haven't forgotten about the retired members in developing the website, and we'll look to serve them the best we can. But I agree with you, it is an area that we do need to make sure that we are helping people with.
Thank you for that question. It reminds me of a parishioner I've been helping on a totally different matter in my community, who has no no access to any technology except a standard landline phone. She does not have a computer. She does not have a mobile phone. We're not forgetting those people, are we? And to follow up Councillor Slatter's question, if they suddenly find themselves in receipt of a widow's pension, do we have adequate communications for them?
I would need to check the exact communications that go out with the award of a widow's pension. I'm not sure what's in that off the top of my head. Another part of the service deals with those particular specific communications, but we can certainly take that away and look at that. In terms of members that don't have access to digital communications, no, they're certainly not forgotten. As much as we would prefer people to use digital, we recognise that we can't force everybody to do that, and not everybody has the ability. So we maintain the option for them to confirm that they prefer to opt out of digital communications and receive paper copies of the communication still. So we will always continue to serve that, and we also maintain a link to services where we can develop different types of material if we need to. So larger lettering, for example, different languages, Braille even is a service we can, but we do that upon request rather than something as standard as you'd expect.
Thank you very much. That sounds excellent. Are there any?
Follow up on that. Being also aware when you get around to writing wills and so on and appointing people with power of attorney and power of the financial attorney, do we ask people, our members, to actually inform us of the identity of somebody who they might well be appointing to look after themselves if they're failing, or indeed their widow or widower, because there's no point us sending letters if nobody's opening them. Thank you.
I think Michelle might actually be better placed to answer this than me. I'm not sure how long ago it was the project went on, but we did have a project where we were doing address tracing, and power of attorney was one of the issues that we were considering as part of that, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we do have processes in place where, as Mark said earlier, when we did the first address tracing, we tried to do it to the majority of the membership that we didn't hold addresses for. And the response rate on that was a bit mixed, and it ended up being quite a large undertaking due to the volume. So what we tend to do now is kind of focus the tracing that we do on particular cohorts, depending on if there's something significant going to happen in terms of receiving a pension. So before retirement, we'll try and contact as many people as we can through a tracing service. In terms of the power of attorneys, we do have a system in place where we make sure that we've got appropriate power of attorneys in place, and that we recognise obviously the different types of power of attorney to make sure that we're holding the correct one on record, and to make sure it's up to date and valid, and to make sure the relevant checks are done on those. So we do have processes in place to make sure that we're contacting the right people in the right scenarios.
Thank you. Val,
Yeah,
you had your hand up.
I have. It's just following on from what Corey was saying and Councillor Slatter about people who are older and not having access to internet, mobile phones, and etc. It doesn't just apply to people who are older. I don't consider myself old, but I have a friend who's same age as me, and she flatly refuses to have a mobile phone, internet. She doesn't have a computer. She's in her early 60s. This issue might not go away for another 20 years or more. It's just something, and she can't be the only one in the country of my age that doesn't want to engage with technology.
I would totally agree. I am aware of other people who've taken that same approach. I do think, though, we've gone down a particular route from the business plan update, which perhaps Mark wasn't necessarily expecting. But I think we've probably done a very effective look at that business plan. So thank you, Mark. Can I move on then to item 7, which is the board's annual report. Michelle, do you want to present it or? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, there's too many Michelles, obviously. It's a popular name. Yes, this is your annual report in front of you for comment and approval. This report will go to full council in December, along with the Pension Committee annual report and the Audit and Accounts Committee annual report. So at this point, just asking if you have any comments on the document attached as an appendix.
I believe Councillor Slatter at least has found one missing word. I'm not sure whether, what else?
I wasn't going to do it in full public view, but yeah, there's an available missing, but I will email you, Michelle, especially now. Make sure I write to the right Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on the report?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Val.
It's just on page 90, Michelle. You've got me attending a PLSA local authority conference on the 18th of the 5th, 2020. I hadn't even applied for this role on that date. I don't know whether you could just erase that one from the list.
Absolutely no problem.
Thank you very much.
So if there are no other questions, this will then be our annual report. And just checking that you are all happy with that as that report.
Yeah, I'm happy with the report.
Happy with the report.
Thank you, one and all. Thank you, Michelle. Get the right one this time. And I believe that we have approved this annual report. Thank you. That was, we now have the forward agenda plan. Are there any questions or it certainly looks as though we have a busy next couple of meetings. Councillor Slatter.
Just a simple question. Will we continue to be able to meet online for things? What are the regulations that apply to this body?
If I may, we can continue to meet online as the local pension fund board because we aren't a decision-making body. So we can do that for as long as you would like.
I follow that up. It's not that I don't want to meet people in person, but I am aware also that people are scattered, you know, and it's very sensible to be efficient. And maybe that might be something that the chair would be, you know, guided by, depending on the topic in question or whatever. Thank you.
My answer, I think, would also have been that we are not a 1972 Local Government Act committee. The regulations under which this board was established were significantly later than that. I'm sure I ought to know when. I think it was 2015. And they specifically allow us to do, if my memory serves me correctly, anything within anything that is reasonable to do to make sure that we do our job. And that, I think, has been interpreted to mean that we can meet virtually. I took this opportunity to actually have an in-person meeting. By the introduction, it's the first time we have done that as this particular board. But I do expect that we will be then returning to virtual meetings. It will cope with the fact that people are scattered, and it will cope, as was pointed out to us last time, but to minimize carbon dioxide contributions by all the travel. So yes, I expect to be meeting virtually. Val, you have a question?
I do. It's just a small typo, actually. It's on page 98. The meeting of the 28th of the 4th, 23, it says the minutes of the 4th, 11, 22. I think the minutes that we'll be reviewing, and obviously the chairman will be signing off that time, will be the 27th of the 1st, 23.
Thank you. I'll get that updated.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Val. I think most of us had missed that one, so thank you very much.
Can I just make a point, Chair? Just regarding, I quite like this kind of decision that Chair and Vice Chair we made before, that we meet just once a year in person. And I'd quite like to keep that arrangement.
Thank you. Let's review that after on the end of this year. So we'll review that when we meet after April. So we'll take the forward plan as noted. We will now move to items for which it is necessary to exclude the press and public. Do members agree to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the reports contain exempt information under paragraph 1 and 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed in discussion, as it contains information relating to an individual and the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Is that agreed? So thank you.